Happy Halloween, darling! Oh, come here. You look so tired from that party I threw. Well, now, you don't have to worry your pretty little head one bit. We're going to enjoy resting the night away together. Come here. Come rest with me in bed. I want to serenade you in the scary stories. You see, as your cute goth girlfriend, what more fitting thing would it be if I was a witch and told you some nice creepypastas I really enjoyed? For the holiday, of course. 'Tis the season to be scary after all. And there's no one better than me to read you these stories now. I know you love how I read to you, so come, rest your head upon me. I will cuddle and hold you tight throughout each and every one of these stories. You don't need to worry. Just close your eyes. Listen to the soothness of my voice and the crackling of the fire pit. It is just you and I, and our imagination to take us into the night. Now remember, darling, these are just stories. None of them are real. And if you get scared, you can hold me tight. I promise, my little puppy, I'll keep you safe and warm. And none of these monsters will ever bite you during the night. That is my job after all, not theirs. Now, there you go, darling. All cozied up, ready to hear the stories? Good. I'm glad. Now cuddle me and listen to my harrowing tales of the night. Mwah. Sometimes, otherworldly beings find interesting ways to try and contact you. They might use an Ouija board, or maybe come to you in a dream, or sometimes they speak through another person. They each have their own style and preference that's particular to them. The one who contacted Jack spoke to him through his computer, or I guess you could say the communication was through on-screen text. The first time it happened, Jack had been sitting at his computer playing solitaire. A blinking red light from the router indicated that his internet connection was down again. This was at least a weekly occurrence, and Jack was getting used to this spotty internet service. As he moved his cards, the game faded into a solid black screen, and the red text appeared. Hi, Jack. I need a favor from you. You're a very special person, and I know you'll help me. I can't ask this of just anyone. I really need your help. Jack paused for a second. The router light was still blinking red. Is this some sort of a joke? He couldn't help but wondering. Several moments later, the message continued. Yes, Jack. I know this is weird for you, but I don't want you to worry. This is just a small, easy favor I need. I'll make sure you're rewarded. Now nearly in a panic, Jack reached around and pulled the internet cable completely from the wall. Still here, Jack. I don't want to waste any more of your time, so I'll get right to what I need. Tomorrow, when you go to work, I need you to move the large potted plant that's next to the elevator on the ground floor. All you have to do is pull it out 3 inches from the wall. If you do it at 8:17 a.m., nobody else will be in the area. Jack sat there, refusing to respond, still trying to figure out what was happening. The writing continued. Look, Jack, I'm asking you because I know you'll do it. You won't let me down. You're special. We'll talk tomorrow. Jack pulled the power cord from the wall and the computer went blank. Did that really just happen? He thought. Still shaking from the experience, he took a warm shower and got ready for bed, convincing himself that he'd either had some crazy dream or that it was just some elaborate joke. But who would play that kind of joke on him? He didn't really have friends or enemies. He woke up the next morning feeling refreshed. Work would start at 8:30 a.m. and Jack was never late. He pulled into the parking lot at 8:10 a.m. Normally, he'd just go right in, but the message had told him to move the plant at 8:17 a.m. Was he really going to do it? Overnight, Jack's fear had turned into curiosity. Let's say he moved the plant. He wouldn't be doing anything wrong or illegal, right? In Jack's mind, the most reasonable course of action was to move the plant. He'd do it, nothing would happen, and he'd be able to put this whole crazy matter behind him. 1 minute before 8:17, Jack left his car and walked towards the building. He entered the foyer at the exact time he was supposed to. The message was right. Nobody else was around. Odd, Jack thought. The building was normally busy this time of morning, but this temporary lull had been accurately predicted. Fine, let's see what happens, Jack muttered to himself. He walked up to the large potted plant placed firmly between the two elevators in the lobby of the 10-story building. The plant looked like it was fake, a decoration people passed every day without really noticing. It was a lot heavier than Jack realized. He put some might into his effort and pulled the plant out 3 inches to his best estimate. He stood back and looked at the plant, then looked around the lobby. People were coming in behind him now, and the lobby was starting to fill up again. Nobody seemed to notice the plant was in a slightly different location. Nothing seemed different at all. Jack skipped to the next elevator and waited. Waited for something. But nothing happened. Finally, Jack entered the elevator and made it to his 7th floor cubicle on time, like always. If you ever asked Jack's coworkers to describe him, you'd hear words like polite, quiet, respectful, and competent. And while those words were all accurate, they gave little indication of the truth. The truth that Jack really didn't like most people. That's not to say he disliked them, just that he had very little interest in getting to know them or being their friend, save for one. Ali, the girl who sat 2 cubicles down from him, was the only person he wanted to know more about. With her big smile, blonde hair, and beautiful figure, Jack was very interested in learning all about her. Despite his lack of success with women in the past, he was actually doing a fair job getting to know her. Every morning as he passed her cubicle, he'd stop for a chat. The chats were 1 minute at first, then 2 minutes, then several minutes. Jack was surprised that she actually seemed to like him. On this particular morning, their daily conversation lasted only a couple of minutes. As they exchanged their morning greetings and talked about Ali's wild night out, the elevator doors opened up behind them. Out hobbled James Bentley, the boss of both Jack and Ali. James' loud complaining could be heard throughout the office. "My damn foot!" "What happened, James?" came the mumbled queries. "It's that damn plant they have in the lobby. I ran right into it and twisted my ankle." "James, you can barely walk. You need to go to the hospital," came Allie's concerned reply. "Can't do it now. I have meetings all day. Too important to cancel. I'll just have to tough it out." Jack, feeling stunned, left Allie's cubicle mid-conversation and sunk down into his chair. It was his fault. He was sure of it. How could he have been so stupid and careless? Still, no use in worrying about it now. A twisted ankle would heal. Everything would be alright. Upon his return home, Jack went immediately to his computer and turned it on. As soon as the computer booted up, the screen went black and a new message popped up. "How's your day, Jack?" He sat there, staring at the screen, not knowing how to answer. The message on the screen continued. "Actually, I know how your day was, but never let it be said that I'm not polite. You're wondering what's going on. You want to know why James Bentley had to twist his ankle. Well, Jack, this chain of events isn't done playing out. I don't want to tell you too much too soon, but this will all make sense to you in short order. Just go to work tomorrow like you normally do. Don't worry about a thing, Jack. You'll be rewarded. You're special. Talk to you tomorrow." Jack sat back in his chair. What was going on? Who was this sending him messages? Jack's curiosity was fully engaged, and he was almost a bit excited to see what would happen next. The next morning at work started off as any ordinary day. Jack noticed that the plant had been pushed back fully against the wall, probably by the night cleaning crew. James Bentley showed up shortly after lunch, hobbling to the office on his one good foot. "My foot is killing me," Jack could overhear him say, but apparently James still had a meeting he didn't want to miss. It wasn't until around 3 o'clock that Jack saw him again. James, who always seemed to prefer Allie over others, came limping to her cubicle. "Allie, you're not doing anything right now, are you?" No. Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow, I guess." "Good. Could you please drive me to see my doctor? I probably should have gone yesterday, but I just couldn't get away. This pain is just killing me right now, and I don't think I can drive myself. I barely made it here this morning, and I just don't think I can even push the gas pedal right now. We can take my car if you want." "Yeah, that's fine, James. I don't have a problem taking you." Turning to Jack, she said her goodbye. "See you tomorrow, Jackie." She put on her coat and slowly followed James as he struggled down the hallway. She gave a half turn and a shrug in Jack's direction, with a little smile as she walked away. Jack felt even lonelier than normal when she was gone. It was 10 minutes later that they all heard the crash. It was preceded by the loud horn of an 18-wheeler and screeching brakes. The collision itself was a sickening thud of two large metal objects colliding. Even on the 7th floor, it was loud. The office workers gasped and ran to the windows. "Is that James's car?" one of them asked. "Hard to tell from up here," someone responded. "It's so banged up." The horrifying implication of what had just happened came to Jack immediately. No, he thought. "This can't be true." Shaking all the way, he ran to the elevator and went to the ground floor with several others from the office. Some of them were crying. As they joined the growing crowd around the scene of the accident, Jack could hear the far-off sound of emergency sirens. Looking past the gawkers, he could see that the 18-wheeler had hit James's car broadside. Its driver had been thrown out onto the pavement where he lay motionless. James was still sitting in the passenger seat of his car, motionless but with a surprised look on his bloody face. Jack couldn't tell if he was alive or dead. The driver's side, where Ali has been seated, had taken the hit. The space she'd been occupying had been compacted to a third of its original side. The crowd was stunned. Tears, screams, sirens. That was all Jack could hear. Without going back inside the building, Jack ran to his car and drove home, angry and sad. He made the journey home and to his computer. There the machine sat. He wanted to turn it on, but was afraid of what he'd find out. Was he really the one responsible for Ali's death? The whole chain of events had started with him. He knew he was to blame. Jack reached for the power button and then pulled his hand back. Finally, after several minutes, he found the mental strength to turn it on. The screen flickered and then went black, and the familiar text started appearing on the screen. No, Jack. It's not your fault. I know you're blaming yourself, but all people die eventually. Some just sooner than others. Jack stared at the screen. He resisted the urge to throw the monitor to the ground. After a moment, the writing continued. Jack, I'm going to tell you something, and I really need you to seriously consider everything I'm about to say. You thought you were in love with Ali. The truth is, you just wanted to fuck her. And please excuse my language, but every once in a great while, it's best to be blunt. Jack, she wasn't the one for you. She would have made your life miserable. Yes, you would have eventually found the courage to ask her out. She actually was interested in you. She thought you'd make a good project. Sad, really, for her, not for you. I want you to think back to all the things she told you. Why did her last boyfriend break up with her? Because she cheated on him, Jack mumbled under his breath. Because she cheated on him, Jack. The same thing she would have done to you. She would have made you happy for about 2 months and then miserable for the next 4 years. Sneaking around, laughing at you behind your back. Spending all your money. Once you finally got rid of her, you would have been so jaded that you'd never date again. This is true, Jack. I see all future possibilities. The ones that come to pass and the ones that don't. You've seen how she really is, Jack. But you let your lust for her blind you to the truth. Together, you and I have made sure you avoided that path. One more thing, Jack. This isn't done playing out yet. There's more to come. No! Fuck you! You killed her! Jack screamed and threw the monitor from the desk. It landed on the floor and sparked out. Jack barely slept any that night. And the next day he wasn't sure he wanted to go to work, but the last words he'd been told had piqued his curiosity, and his anger had somewhat subsided. No work was done that day at the office. The company brought in grief counselors. People shared their thoughts. They cried. They hugged. James had actually survived the accident, but was in a coma. The doctors thought he might recover eventually, but nobody was really sure. Late in the afternoon, Jack was approached by Diego Salbarra, the head of the division. Diego was blunt and upfront, and he offered James's position to Jack. Technically, it would be a temporary promotion, but James wouldn't be back anytime soon. Diego promised him that the promotion would be made permanent once enough time had passed. "Let's keep this on the low key for now," Diego told him. "I know it might seem quick, but the Lancaster project James was working on can't be stopped. It's too important to the company. I need someone in charge right away. This can't wait." Stunned, Jack accepted the promotion. He left work with a strange mixture of feelings, not really sure how he felt on anything. On his way home, he stopped at the electronics store and bought a new monitor. He made it home and powered up the computer. Once again, the writing came on the screen. "Jack, I want to be the first one to congratulate you. I'm proud of what you've accomplished." Jack stared at the screen. "Jack, I have to ask your forgiveness because I haven't introduced myself yet. I'm called the Seer. Like I told you before, I see what will be and I see what can be. It's a very powerful gift I have. But you know what, Jack? For all my power, I still can't do anything corporeal. I can predict, I can see, and with enough effort, I can even communicate. But I don't have a body. That's something that was taken from me long, long ago. That's why I need you, Jack. I'm an artist of sorts, an artist of human manipulation. You'll be my paintbrush and my canvas. I want you to work with me, Jack. It's all very simple. Just perform simple tasks for me, from time to time." Jack was becoming more and more curious. "And Jack, before you give me an answer, I want you to know a couple of things. First off, I'll never lie to you. Secondly, I'll never ask you to do anything which, taken by itself, is wrong or illegal. Yes, bad things will result, and sometimes people will die. But they're going to die eventually anyways, right, Jack? And the bad will always be balanced out by something good happening to you." Jack winced at this last idea, but he fought the urge to turn the computer off. The Seer was right. Everyone would die eventually. Why not let something good come of it? And what about never lying to him? If he'd known at the time that Ali was going to die, he'd have never gone through with the original favor. But as he thought more about it, he realized the Seer hadn't lied to him, but only had withheld information. Still, Jack wondered if he could trust the Seer. "Work with me, Jack. Together we'll make incredible things happen. I'm just asking you to perform little tasks from time to time. Oh, but these little tasks will have great consequences. They're going to be beautiful, Jack, and they'll always end with a reward for you. That's the beauty of my art. One single task produces something bad and something good. Oh, one last thing, Jack. I can see you're having trouble with this. If I stopped talking to you right now, it would take you about 2 weeks to decide to join me. But you know what, Jack? You would join me. That's right, you're going to say yes. So, instead of waiting, why don't you just say yes to me right now? Let's get started, Jack. And when all this is over, you're going to thank me. I promise you." Jack considered what the Seer had just said. His initial feeling of revolt was slowly fading. He paused, and then, for the first time, he placed his fingers on the keyboard and responded directly to the Seer. "What do you want me to do next?" As years passed, Jack did every favor the Seer asked of him. And as the seer had promised, Jack was rewarded for his actions each time. The rewards often came in unexpected and interesting ways. One of the more memorable experiences for Jack happened about 2 years after he first agreed to help the seer. "Jack, I need you to go downtown tomorrow," the seer requested. "Enter Garmin's liquor store at exactly 12:37 p.m. A man will ask you a question. The answer you're to give him is 27. As always, the seer's instructions were simple and direct, yet mysterious. The next day, as requested, Jack entered the store. In front of him, a burly construction worker was at the counter filling out a lottery play-slip. "Let's see here," said the construction worker. "My birthday, that's the 15th. My wife's birthday, that's the 24th, and my kids' ages 2, 10, and 13. The man scratched his head and looked around, zeroing in on Jack. "Hey buddy, I need another number. You got one for me?" Jack smiled. 27. "Really? I was thinking about playing 35, but you know what? I like your face. Let's go with 27. And with that, the man completed his slip and paid for his lottery ticket. "See ya, pal," he said happily, and he patted Jack on the shoulder on his way out the door. Jack tried not to put any more thought into what would happen to this man. Just let things play out, Jack. You'll never guess how things end up, so just let yourself be surprised, the seer had advised him. Still, it was impossible not to wonder about these things from time to time. He knew, considering the way the seer worked, there was no possible that he'd actually helped this man. But giving him a losing lottery number, that was too simple for the seer. And he couldn't imagine he'd actually given him a winning number. So that's how Jack was surprised when 2 weeks later, he ran into the same man again, this time at the grocery store. "Hey buddy, it's you! I remember you! Check it out! I won!" Indeed, the man looked like $1 million, wearing new clothes, a new gold watch, and a big goofy smile. The man walked right up to Jack. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again, but I'm glad you're here. I could have never won without you. Hey, let me buy these groceries for you. No, wait, that's not good enough for you. You're my good luck charm. Always gotta treat people right. That's what my mom says." Reaching into his pocket, the man removed his checkbook and promptly wrote Jack a check for $10,000. "It's the least I can do for you, my good luck charm." After thanking the man and feeling a bit confused by the whole thing, Jack raced home to his computer. After turning it on, the seer's writing appeared on the screen. "Well, Jack, how does it feel to be $10,000 richer?" "It feels good, but I can't help but wonder. We've never helped anyone before. Why are we starting it now?" Jack asked that question with a tinge of guilt. He never liked to admit that people were being hurt by his actions. But in this case, his curiosity overwhelmed any latent feelings of guilt. "Oh, Jack, we haven't helped anyone. Yes, that man is happy now, but he'll have lost every last penny within 2 years. You saw it yourself. He just gives money away. Old friends, lost relatives, they're all going to come asking for money. And there will be some very bad investments as well. The stress of losing everything is going to cause his wife to leave him. She'll take the kids, too. He'll be alone and broke, a ruined man who would have been much better off if he'd never won. You needn't feel bad for Jack. It's the man's own stupidity and greed that will do it for him." Jack felt some regret, but the seer's rationalization and focusing on his own reward always put him at peace in the end. Through the years, no two tasks were ever alike. Sometimes the effects of his actions were direct and easy to see. Other times they caused a chain reaction so complex that he simply could not follow it. Go to the country administrator's building. Park in space number 43 at 4:47 p.m. Came one such request. Jack did so. And 2 months later, he met Donna, with whom he fell in love and ended up marrying. He wouldn't have even known the two events were related if he didn't ask the seer about it. Jack, when you parked in that space, you caused the person who would have parked there to park in a different spot. But she bumped the car next to her. She barely made a scratch, but she called her insurance agent anyways, causing him to leave the office late. He missed his train home, and while waiting for the late train, he was mugged. He'll never fully recover. The muggers took his credit cards and used them. And Jack, I could keep going with this, but there's another 23 people involved. Sometimes these favors are going to be very complicated, but let's just say your action ultimately caused Donna to be in the exact place for you to meet her. Jax's relationship with the seer grew. Though remaining mostly mysterious, the seer divulged enough information over time so that Jack could get a generalized understanding of the seer's history. From historical references, Jack knew the seer was thousands of years old. When still alive, the seer had been a powerful fortune teller and artist who foretold future happenings through paintings. A foolish king who misinterpreted the seer's prediction and lost a battle as a result had the seer executed. Unencumbered by physical senses and existing in a lonesome void, the seer's abilities expanded exponentially. Finally learning to communicate with the living, the seer began reaching out to those who would respond, including Jack. And of course, the seer knew everything about Jack. In all, it was as much of a friendship as one can have with a dead person. And Jack was grateful to the seer too. He had a nice job, a nice house, a beautiful wife, and people respected him. He was happy, which is something he never really felt before the seer contacted him. 12 years in total passed, 12 good years for Jack. Tasks after tasks was completed, usually about one every month. Jack, sitting in the office of his large rural house, was contacted by the seer once again. Hi, Jack. I have a favor to ask of you. This one's the easiest yet. You don't even have to get up. Call Riago's Pizza in exactly 2 minutes. Let the phone ring 3 times. Then you can hang up. Jack smiled nice and easy. He no longer wondered about how these tasks would play out. He trusted the seer and simply did as he was told. Jack made the call exactly 2 minutes later. The quietness of the household was broken 30 minutes later by the ringing doorbell. That's odd, Jack thought. Neither he nor Donna were expecting anyone. Jack looked out the peephole and saw a pizza delivery boy. The logo on his cap said Riago's Pizza. Jack opened the door. Here's your pizza, said the boy as he thrust it into Jack's hand. But I didn't order this, Jack argued. Look, I don't give a damn if you ordered it or not. Mr. Riago told me to take it here, so that's what I'm doing. The delivery boy argued as he looked increasingly annoyed and spat in the dishes. Jack looked at the boy in front of him. He looked to be about 17 years old, but the most noticeable thing about him was his size. He was huge, probably about 6.5 feet tall, and very muscular. It's already paid for by credit card, so just take it, because I'm not driving it back. The boy put out his hand for a tip. I don't have any cash on me, Jack told the truth. Whatever, came the disgusted reply. The boy looked past Jack into the house, then turned and walked slowly to his waiting car, looking over his shoulder as he walked. Jack closed the door, and took the pizza to the living room where Donna was watching TV. After explaining what had happened, he excused himself to go to his office, promising to return shortly. Donna opened the pizza and took a piece. "Come back soon, sweetie. This pizza's got all your favorite toppings on it." Donna giggled as she took a bite. Arriving at his computer, the seer's words appeared on the screen. "Confused, Jack, don't be. Your neighbor down the street ordered the pizza." Mr. Riago told the boy the correct address, but a ringing phone made it difficult for him to be heard clearly. Still, give the boy credit. He got the street right at least. "So my reward is pizza?" Jack typed, a little confused. "Yes, Jack. Your reward is a pizza. And also the chance to spend a little time with your wife. Go down there, share the pizza, enjoy it. When you're done, make love to Donna. That's not one of your tasks, that's just some advice I think you should follow. Oh, by the way, your neighbors who ordered the pizza are arguing right now over the silly fact that the pizza didn't arrive. Some of the things people argue over amaze me, they really do. Their fight is going to get very heated, but you don't need to worry about that. Go, enjoy your night." Jack followed the seer's advice, cuddled with Donna as they enjoyed their meal, and then made love to her on the big, comfortable living room couch. Donna fell asleep on the couch shortly after 11 p.m. Jack lay there awake. This latest favor had just felt odd. Carefully extracting his arm from under Donna, Jack left the living room and headed upstairs, sitting down at the computer. Jack typed, "Are you there?" "Yes, Jack. I'm always here. I've been waiting for you to come back. That pizza delivery boy, he's quite a specimen, isn't he?" Jack looked quizzically at the screen. The seer continued, "He's a horrible employee. He was hired only 3 days ago and already Mr. Riago wants to fire him. But as a physical specimen, he's strong, fast, and very observant. For example, he noticed that you didn't lock the front door after he delivered your pizza." "What?" Jack said aloud as he started to get up. "Sit down, Jack. I need to tell you something important, and locking the door now won't change your situation." Jack slowly took a seat again at the computer, looking behind himself as he did so. "You see, Jack, it's true that I never lied to you. Everything I've ever told you is 100% honest. But yes, I've withheld certain facts. You see, I told you that every task causes something bad to happen to someone else, and something good to happen to you, but there's a third thing. There's an ultimate goal that each task was working toward. Remember Ali? Of course you do. What you probably don't remember about her is that she was helping to pay her brother's way through college. When she died, he had to drop out. He was going to be a great psychologist, but now he works in a factory instead. That's really too bad for our pizza delivery boy. He could have used a good therapist a few years ago. But that good therapist wasn't there for him. Instead, he got some frauding quack. And remember our lottery winner? Oh, yes, you do. He was a neighbor to our pizza boy. After he lost all his money, of course. He beat the boy senseless after the boy jumped into the street in front of his car. Quite a traumatic memory for our young lad. And his mother didn't even care about that incident. Didn't protect the boy at all. She couldn't. Not after using all the drugs given to her by her boyfriend, who happened to be one of the muggers who robbed that insurance agent. He brought the drugs with the money he made from the robbery. Do you see now the scope of my artistry? Jack sat, glaring at the monitor. He wanted to get up, to check Donna, but he was too scared to make a move. The seer continued, Jack, you've done over 100 tasks for me, and each one has served an ultimate purpose. To psychologically destroy the boy, turn him into a monster, and to bring him here tonight. Don't you see, Jack? This involved tens of thousands of people and billions of possibilities. If you had failed to even complete one of the tasks, the whole chain would have collapsed. This was orchestrated by me and set in motion by you. Together, we've done something wonderful. This is a masterpiece of human manipulation. Our masterpiece. And it all begins and ends with you. 2 perfect points in a time. Tonight, wrong address, no tip. This poor boy finally snapped. He's downstairs right now. He's slitting Donna's throat at this exact moment. Jack could hear a short, muffled scream coming from the living room, followed by a gurgling noise. No! Jack screamed and stood up, starting to run downstairs. Jack, stop! The voice startled Jack. It was inside him, inside his head. For the first time, the seer was talking to him directly. It was a pleasant voice, a feminine voice. You can't do anything. She's already gone. He'll be coming for you shortly, and you can't stop him. But why? Jack cried with tears welling up in his eyes. It's not an artistic masterpiece if it doesn't begin and end with you, Jack. Her voice was soothing. I want you to appreciate the fact that I'm talking to you directly. This requires all of my energy, and as a result, I'll have to rest for several years before I can contact anyone again. That's how special you are to me. Please don't feel bad about this, Jack. I want you to take a moment and enjoy our accomplishment as much as I do. The voice paused briefly and then continued. Do you know what, Jack? If I never contacted you, you would have lived for 85 years. 85 boring, meaningless, and bitter years. And when you died, nobody would have been at your funeral. I give you 12 great, meaningful years. You were happy, and together we did something beautiful, something unique. Jack paused a minute and considered his 12 years of happiness, and his tears of sorrow mixed with tears of joy. He turned and looked at the computer, while behind him the massive hulk of the demented delivery boy appeared in the doorway, a bloody knife in his hand. On the screen, the last 6 words from the seer appeared. Don't you have something to say to me, Jack? Jack wiped his tears and absorbed everything the seer had just told him. As the Hulk started stepping closer to him, Jack mouthed his final words. Thank you. The Rake. As the sun begins to set and the trees huddle together in small dark groups as if shielding themselves against the coming of night, you step quietly and quickly through the carpet of fallen leaves and stray twigs, recognizing and noting as you do every rustle, every snap of a branch created by your own footfalls. You note them so that you can distinguish them from the other sounds. The soft rustling of leaves, the crack of bracken somewhere behind you. You increase your speed, knowing that night is not the only thing drawing closer. The sound increases as your pace and heartbeats quicken. You turn, and in the fading light catch a single glimpse of the hunched, crawling thing that is pursuing you, creeping forward like an animal, and yet looking so horribly human. You only caught a single glimpse, but then you start to run. One glimpse is enough. Mostly associated with the image of a bald, pale-skinned creature hunched at an angle with bright orb-like eyes staring into the camera. The Rake has become a staple creepypasta monster, adopted by many authors as shorthand for a creature resembling the one depicted in the photo and placed in various settings. During the summer of 2003, events in the northeastern United States involving a strange, human-like creature sparked brief local media interest before an apparent blackout was enacted. Little or no information was left intact, as most online and written accounts of the creature were mysteriously destroyed. Primarily focused on rural New York State, self-proclaimed witnesses told stories of their encounters with the creature of unknown origin. Emotions ranged from extremely traumatic levels of fright and discomfort to an almost childlike sense of playfulness and curiosity. While their published versions are no longer on record, the memories remained powerful. Several of the involved parties began looking for answers that year. In early 2006, the collaboration had accumulated nearly 24 documents dating between the 12th century and present day, spanning 4 continents. In almost all cases, the stories were identical. I've been in contact with a member of this group and was able to get some excerpts from their upcoming book. A journal entry translated from Spanish, 1880. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand. I will not sleep his voice. A Mariner's Log, 1691. He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed, I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not return here again at the request of the Rake. From a Witness, 2006. 3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip from Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. At about 4 a.m., I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used the moment to steal back the sheets, only to wake him in the process. I apologized and told him I thought he got out of bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped and pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly his knee almost knocked me out of the bed. He then grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for half a second, I was able to see what caused the strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man or a large, hairless dog of some sort. Its body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For some reason, I was not instantly frightened by it, but more concerned as to its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and knee, tucked into the fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, the creature scrambled around the side of the bed and then crawled quickly in a flailing sort of motion, right along the bed until it was less than a foot from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds, or probably closer to 5. It just seemed like a while, just looking at my husband's face. The creature then placed its hand on his knee and ran into the hallway leading to the kids' rooms. I screamed and ran for the light switch, planning to stop him before he hurt my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunched over about 20 feet away. He turned around and looked directly at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter, Clara. The creature ran downstairs while my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was very badly injured and spoke only once more in her short life. She said, "He is the Rake." My husband drove his car into a lake that night while rushing our daughter to the hospital. Being a small town, news got around pretty quickly. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published and the local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen the creature we now referred to as the Rake. It took the 4 of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believed to be accounts of the Rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-up. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages, and never mentioning it again. A ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the Rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was one of a series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the Rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night, every night, for 2 weeks. I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in my bed each day when I woke up. By the end of the 2nd week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleep while blurring through the recordings at 8 times the normal speed. This still took almost an hour every day. On the first day of the 3rd week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the Rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I've heard it before, and now I believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason, the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head made me very upset. I have not seen the Rake since he ruined my life, but I know that he has been in my room while I slept. I know in fear that one night, I'll wake up to see him staring at me. Distorted warning signals. When I got to the first one, I was literally seconds away from stepping onto the plane when a call from unknown blared from my cell phone. It was a ringtone I hadn't heard before, one I was pretty sure hadn't come with the phone. Normally, I wouldn't have stopped to answer it, but I was expecting a call about a job I had interviewed for the previous week. I took a deep breath in and accepted the call. Hello? Do not get in the plane. A woman's voice, garbled and strange, as if her vocal cords had been shredded and she was trying desperately to choke out speech. Despite the unnerving, fractured quality of her voice, Her tone was insistent and eerily calm. Then, the phone call ended. I froze. I had always had a slight phobia of air travel, and something about this call just... There's no way I was about to get on a 7-hour flight now. I turned around and headed toward the food court. I'd just get another flight later in the afternoon, I'd figured. I watched from the airport Starbucks 3 hours later as every TV in the terminal lit up with the crash footage of the plane I should have been on. No survivors. Not a single one. I tried to trace the call, so did the police. But there was nothing to trace. There was no evidence my phone had ever received a call around that time. They analyzed phone records, incoming and outgoing communication to my phone. Nothing. I wasn't making it up. I couldn't have been. That wasn't the only call. Throughout the years, they were few and far between, but always right. And I always listened. Do not go on that blind date tonight. 5 months later, my would-be date was convicted of killing 4 women, all with my hair color and build. Found them in a shallow grave about 250 feet from the diner he offered to take me to. Do not drive to that concert tonight. 18-wheeler lost control and plowed into a line of cars. Every driver crushed, every driver killed. In the stretch of freeway I would have been driving down. No matter if I got a new phone, if I moved across the country, the calls would still come. I could almost feel the presence of whatever it was, whatever it is, watching over me. I imagined being at the bottom of the freezing ocean, still strapped into my coach section plane seat, or being in that mass grave across from the diner, or watching an 18-wheeler skidding toward my car, knowing death was imminent, and I'd get this tightness in my chest. I think about how thin that line was, how close I'd gotten. If I hadn't had a job interview I was waiting to hear back from, I'd have never listened to that first call, and that would be it for me. It always felt like something was coming for me, but there was always this fractured, warped voice with these calls that never seemed to exist after I heard them. Self-destructing warning signals rotting away before my eyes, and I was alive. I had a bad feeling about this cruise. I had planned it as a girls' week out with some of my old friends from college, and was looking forward to a week in the tropics in the dead of winter. But part of me could almost sense that the call was coming. Maybe I'd watched the Titanic one too many times, but there was a little nagging fear from the start. I hoped it would be fine, but I knew that if something was going to happen, I'd get the call. I'd know. Now, a week before I'm to set out to the cruise, after stepping into my apartment after returning from dinner with a friend, I noticed my cell has a message from unknown. They've never had tried to leave a message before. Haven't checked it all night. Damn it. And I had really wanted to go on that cruise too. Well, not worth whatever horrific fates awaited me in that cold, dark ocean. I click play message and felt my stomach drop as I listened to the voice, sounding horrifically distorted, as if it emanates from a throat slashed to ribbons, crackling with more urgency than ever before. I look around my apartment as the voice on the phone repeats the same phrase over and over again. Do not come home after dinner tonight. Do not come home after dinner tonight. Do not come home after dinner tonight. Ooh, spooky. Alien abductions are real, and they're worse than you think. Most of you reading this account won't believe my story. Hell, I wouldn't believe if I hadn't lived through the horror. To the best of my knowledge, only 2 people have ever survived this hell and made it back to Earth in one piece. And sadly, the other is no longer living. As for myself, I was warned by the government suits of the serious consequences which would follow if I ever went public with my incredible and chilling story. But I've decided to do so anyway, because I believe people need to know what's really out there, and I fear the truth will become apparent soon enough, as an intergalactic war is coming to our doorstep. As with most of their abduction victims, I'm nobody special or important. In fact, I was at the lowest rung of society. A down and out who'd fallen on hard times as I lost my job, my home, and fell victim to an alcohol addiction. Sleeping rough and filling my belly with cheap vodka to keep myself warm at night. My confession to having an alcohol problem will surely bring my accountant to a question, but I can assure you that I was quite sober when the events I'll describe took place. On the night in question, I'd taken refuge in an abandoned bus shelter set along a lonely back road, falling asleep under the stars after I'd emptied my bottle. I don't know what time I was awoken, but I do vividly remember my senses were simultaneously overloaded. My ears ringing with a deafening buzzing sound and my eyes temporarily blinded by an intense white light. Suddenly and inexplicably, I felt my body rising off the bench, my form being pulled upwards onto the sky. My last memory was of the dark, cigar-shaped aircraft in the sky above me, and to my horror, I realized I was being pulled towards it. But then I felt myself falling out of consciousness, my eyes closing as my whole world went black. I awoke an undeterminable length of time later in a very alien place, quite literally. The first thing I noticed was the pain I felt through my body, a dull throbbing as my bones and joints all ached simultaneously. I soon discovered that I was completely naked, my clothes gone as I lay against cold metal, my skin freezing and body shaking. It caused me physical pain to open my eyes, but when I did there was little I could see because the steel-plated room was dark, only dimly lit by a faint red light. It was at this point that I panicked, quickly standing up on my trembling legs as I darted towards the wall. But I didn't get far, as suddenly I experienced a shooting pain pulsating through my body, feeling like I'd just been hit by a bolt of lightning. I screamed in agony, falling down to the cold, hard floor as I reached for my throat and was horrified to find a metal collar secured around my neck. In an act of panicked desperation, I tore at the collar, trying to remove it, but instead being hit with another surge of electricity that tore through me. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," called out a male voice from the darkness, his tone surprisingly calm given the circumstances. "The shock collar is programmed to go off if you make any sudden movements, or if you try to remove it. The voltage will steadily increase until you either lose consciousness or your heart stops." I experienced a flood of emotions upon hearing his words, confusion, anger, and fear. But I listened to the stranger's advice, not wishing to go through that pain again. Slowly, I opened my dry lips and stuttered out my words. Who are you? And what the hell is this place? My name is Gideon, and I am like you, a prisoner here. Is there anyone else there? I asked cautiously. Yes, came the first response, this time from a scared female voice. I'm Tanya, and I don't know why I'm here. There was a pause before the next voice called out from the darkness, his voice trembling as he spoke. Max. I'm Max. I don't know why this is happening. I want to go home. I'm sure we all do, answered Gideon. But alas, that's not going to happen. I shook my head, imagining this must be some kind of vivid nightmare, but in my heart I knew it was real. You haven't answered my question, I added, as my fear began to turn into anger. Where the fuck are we, and who's done this to us? I heard Gideon sneering before he replied. Well, technically that's 2 questions, but I'm happy to help. Although I suspect you may not like the answers. It's difficult to explain in words, so perhaps it's easier if I show you all. I heard footsteps and saw the shape of a man slowly walking across the metal floor and towards the adjacent wall. He tapped on a hidden control panel with his bony fingers and entered a code. And suddenly, a mechanism began and a shutter slowly opened, unveiling a scene which brought terror to my heart. Because when the shutter was finally open, we all saw a transparent porthole-like window looking outwards, showing a dark sky adorned with distant stars and a blue and green globe that we all recognized very well. I slowly pulled myself up, ignoring the throbbing pains and my naked body as I walked barefoot across to the window and observed the scene in disbelief, scanning the outlines of the familiar green continents, the mighty blue oceans, and the shifting storm fronts which swept across the globe. To my horror, I realized I was looking down at the earth, which could only mean one thing. I was no longer on my home planet. The reflected light of the Earth's surface now illuminated the room we were held inside. A bare metal cell with few visible amenities other than a stinking hole in the ground, which I guess was meant to be a toilet, and hard concrete slabs in the place of beds. I also saw my fellow prisoners clearly for the first time. Tanya and Max appeared as I did, naked, humiliated, and beaten, their eyes full of terror as they saw what I did. Clearly, they were both in a state of shock. I tried to maintain their dignity by focusing on their faces rather than their nude forms. Tanya was a young woman, slim, dark-haired, and attractive, although I recognized the telltale signs of addiction on her, such as pasty skin, bloodshot eyes, and the track marks on her arms. Max was an older man, his physique flabby and skin wrinkled. I saw a raw terror in his eyes, which made me think he was on the verge of a psychological breakdown. Gideon was different, however. I noticed he wore a shock collar like we all did, but he was also fully clothed, wearing a white robe which covered his dignity. True, he didn't look in the best of health, his body emaciated and eyes sullen, as if they'd seen too many horrors. It was also clear that he knew more about our situation than the rest of us. I wasn't the only one to come to this conclusion, as soon all turned on the mysterious Gideon. How the hell did you know about that shutter? I demanded. Gideon held his hands up defensively as he answered, I can explain everything, just give me a chance. Bullshit! Max screamed angrily. You're playing with us, man. Yeah, Tanya agreed. How do we know you're not the one who did this to us? Why the hell should we trust you? In an instant, all three of us were advancing upon Gideon, our fists clenched as we prepared to beat the living shit out of him. Gideon's eyes widened as he lifted his hands up higher, slowly backing off as he said, "You shouldn't do that." "Fuck you," I screamed as I lurched forward. But a second later, I was on the floor, my body convulsing as the shock collar delivered another agonizing jolt. I looked over to see my two nude companions similarly incapacitated, the two of them rolling on the metal surface in agony. When our punishment was over, we all glared upwards, seeing Gideon looking down upon us with a barely concealed look of smug satisfaction on his lips. "I did warn you," he said. Slowly and painfully, I got up on my feet, and my fellow prisoners did likewise as we looked to Gideon for answers. "My friends," he began, "as I've already explained, I am a prisoner here, just like the three of you. It just so happens that our captors have allowed me certain privileges and access to limited information. Why, I cannot say, although I suspect it's part of their plan for me to explain the situation to new arrivals." My mind was racing, the sweat pouring from my skin. None of this made any sense. "I don't understand," asked Tanya, breaking the tense and confused silence. "Who's done this to us? Who the fuck is holding us? And where the hell are we?" Gideon nodded before replying. "Where we are should be obvious, although I understand it's a lot to take in. Nevertheless, we are clearly in a space above our home planet. As to who's holding us, well, that's more difficult to explain. Our captors are not of this world. I assume they come from another star system in our galaxy, although from where exactly I cannot say. They've shared little with me about their culture or civilization. I only know that their technology is vastly superior to our own." "So what are you saying? We've been abducted by fucking aliens?" I explained in shocked disbelief. "That's exactly what I'm saying," Gideon confirmed grimly. "Alien abduction!" Tanya interjected excitedly. "What, you mean like probing and all of that shit?" Max emitted a nervous laughter, but Gideon didn't share in the joke, his face remaining like stone. "I'm afraid it's far worse than that," he said solemnly. "They have no interest in human anatomy, except for the purposes of inflicting physical pain upon us." A cold chill ran down my spine as I asked, "What the hell do you mean?" Gideon didn't answer straight away, instead pointing and directing our attention back towards the portal. I turned my head to look, instantly sickened by the horror that I witnessed, as first one and then a second human body slowly floated through a space and past the window, their naked bodies frozen in the cold vacuum. The first was a man, the second a woman, and both of their corpses showed obvious signs of torture, with deep incisions made into their flesh, burn marks on their skin, and digits sliced off their hands. Their bulging, bloodshot eyes were still open, filled with the pain and terror of their final moments. We all watched in shock and awe as the bodies disappeared from sight, lost forever in the cruel emptiness of space. "Sweet Jesus," I muttered, my whole body shaking with revulsion as I slowly backed away from the portal. "The last batch," Gideon explained solemnly. "Our captors are finished with them." I struggled to force the words out of my throat. "They murdered them! Tortured them first and then dumped their bodies into space. Why? Why would they do that?" "Well, that's the $1,000 question, isn't it?" Gideon answered cryptically. "I don't have all the answers, but I've been on the ship for a while. I've observed what occurs and have had some limited communications with our captors. receiving as much information as a master would provide his slave. From this, I have reached some conclusions. All living organisms are a product of their environment, and the traits they evolve allow them to survive in said environment. The trouble with evolution is that it's hard to shake. We humans consider ourselves an advanced and civilized species, but we are still prone to primal animalistic urges. Now, imagine a species which evolved on a planet much more dangerous than our own, an environment populated by many highly aggressive organisms, where the evolutionary victor would need to be smarter, stronger, and more ruthless than its competitors to end up on top. Move forward a few millennia, and that species is now technologically advanced and capable of intergalactic space travel. It meets other similarly developed civilizations, and inevitably there is conflict. Terrible wars fought across star systems, resulting in countless deaths. Gideon paused briefly as he looked out the portal and towards our far distant planet. It would be safe to say that we were all hanging on his very word, although the implications of what he was telling us were both extraordinary and terrifying. Eventually, these wars end in stalemate, as multiple civilizations fought each other to a bloody standstill. A new order emerges, a sort of galactic UN formed to keep the peace. The war is over. However, our captors still have those same predatory instincts, a leftover from their violent evolution. So, what do they do with these murderous urges? Well, they come to a place like Earth, an uncontacted backwater planet on the edge of the galaxy beyond the laws of the Galactic Confederation. Here, they can kidnap with impunity, taking those who will not be missed and inflicting sadistic tortures upon them before brutally ending their lives. By such underhand methods, our captors can indulge their dark impulses without risking war with their galactic rivals. I shook my head in dismay, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of this madness. In the end, it was Tanya who vocalized what we all must have been thinking. So, you're saying these psychos are like the space versions of Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer? Like, they travel light years just to torture and murder people? Gideon frowned before replying. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, but in a nutshell, yes, this is the situation. I couldn't believe it. My exhausted brain told me this couldn't be true, and even if it was, there must be a way out. What do we do? I asked frantically. How do we get out of this hellhole? Gideon sighed loudly before replying. You don't, I'm afraid. There is no escape from this ship, and there is no way you can avoid your fate. All of you will die here. Sadly, this is inevitable. Bullshit! I cried in angry defiance. They can't be true. You survived. Why haven't they killed you? Our captors keep me alive because I serve their purposes, for now at least. I suspect they will kill me once I outlive my usefulness. Or perhaps they're just saving me for last. In any case, I have accepted that I'll never leave this ship alive. Suddenly, all our attentions were drawn to the corner of the cell where Max had curled himself up into the fetal position, manically nodding his head back and forth as he muttered in a state of disconnected panic. No, this can't be happening. This can't be real. I shouldn't be here. I don't deserve this. I should not be here. A moment later, and the far wall lit up. As suddenly, a previously hidden doorway appeared and slid open. They're coming to claim their first victim, Gideon warned, a fear now evident in his voice. We all backed away from the doorway, trying to prepare ourselves for whatever monstrosity emerged from the other side. But Max had lost his mind, standing up and attempting to run for the door, screaming, "Let me out of here! I need out!" He moved quickly, before any of us had time to react. What happened next was a violent blur in my memory, as a long implement extended out of the darkness and struck Max hard on his head, knocking him backwards and down to the metal floor. The creature which emerged from the shadows and entered our cell was like something from a nightmare. My descriptive skills are not good enough to do the alien being justice, but the best way I can describe the beast's appearance is a cross between a human and a velociraptor. The alien was about 7 foot tall, its body covered with red scales, although it also wore a Kevlar-like body armor over its torso. Its snout-like mouth was filled with sharp fangs, and its dark eyes were those of a reptile, cold, calculating, and predatory. Its arms were relatively short and stumpy compared to the rest of its body, and I noted that the beast had opposable thumbs and digits, meaning it was able to hold and direct the pike-like weapon in its claws, the same metal rod it had used to strike poor Max with. Its legs, on the other hand, looked powerful, and I saw its middle toes were adorned with sharp, curved claws about 6 inches long. It tapped these claws menacingly on the floor as it surveyed us, its naked and helpless human victims. At this point, Max unfortunately regained consciousness, glancing up at the beast above him and screaming out in absolute terror. I swore I could see a cruel smirk on what passed for the alien's lips. Its eyes widened with a sadistic pleasure as it lifted its weapon. A second later, and Max's limp body was roughly dragged across the floor, his shock collar acting like a magnet which attached itself to the end of the alien's metal pike, allowing it to easily pull the kicking and screaming Max out of the cell and into the dark corridor beyond. A moment later, the door slammed shut, leaving a trail of Max's blood and urine on the floor, and the rest of us trapped inside, dealing with the shock of what we'd just witnessed. "My God, what are they gonna do with him?" Tanya asked with a trembling voice. "Trust me, you don't want to know," Gideon answered. I sat down in a corner, my head in my hands as I desperately tried to think. Surely, there must be a way out, I thought. This couldn't be the end, but things only got worse over the next few hours. Clearly, our captors enjoyed tormenting us because, although the cell walls were thick, they deliberately piped in sound using some sort of speaker system, and what we heard were the screams and pleas of our companion Max as he was subjected to unspeakable tortures. Tanya broke down as she laid in a corner and sobbed uncontrollably, while Gideon stood and listened in grim silence. As for me, my mind was on the edge of madness. I kept racking my brain, trying to think of a way out and demanding answers from Gideon, but he didn't provide the answers I needed, as the veteran prisoner seemed resigned to his fate. "We can fight these motherfuckers, surely we can!" I shouted. Gideon shook his head in the negative. "You are naked, unarmed, and have a shock collar attached to your neck. What's more, we are on board their spaceship, surrounded by dozens of armed guards and torturers. Resistance is entirely futile. Believe me, many have tried and all have failed." "Well, we can't reason with them," I asked desperately. "You're able to communicate with these aliens. Can't we make a deal?" Gideon scoffed at the very suggestion. "Reason with them? Our captors regard us as no better than insects. They would no sooner negotiate with us than we would with a common house fly." "Well, there must be something we can do," I cried out angrily, raising my voice to be heard over Max's screams. "We can't just sit here and wait for death." "Don't you think I would have already done something?" Gideon shouted, as for the first time he lost his temper. Don't you realize I've considered every possible option? Shut up! Screamed Tanya, as she raised her tear-covered face from her hands. Shut the fuck up, both of you. This isn't helping. Jesus Christ, man. A man is dying in the next room. Show him some respect. The woman's angry words of rebuke ended our debate, and soon after Max's tortured cries ended, I felt fear, because I knew one of us would be next. Sure enough, it wasn't long before the invisible door in the wall reopened and the 7-foot-tall reptilian guard marched in, its foot claws clicking in excitement as its predatory eyes scanned the cell's interior in search of its next victim. I stood up in defiance, clenching my fists as I faced the beast. I knew any physical resistance would be useless, but still wanted to go down fighting. But the alien's cold eyes ignored me, instead focusing on Tanya and lifting its weapon up as it advanced upon her. I experienced a moment of foolhardy bravery in that moment, as I charged toward the guard, screaming, "No, don't take her! Take me instead!" The alien's reaction was instantaneous, as it struck me with its pike. A shooting pain reverberated through my skull as I collapsed to the ground. With me out of the way, the alien guard continued its advance upon Tanya, who had taken cover in the far corner of the cell. It seemed inevitable that the beast would take her, but then all hell broke loose. There was an almighty explosion and the whole spaceship shook, throwing us all across the cell like helpless rag dolls. This included the alien guard, who was flung heavily against the wall, its head cracking as it made impact. The alien didn't get back up. I don't know whether it was dead or just unconscious, but either way, we were happy for our unexpected salvation. In that moment, we all turned to the portal, astonished to see a second craft soaring through space, a silver, needle-shaped ship which was firing as it sped towards us, shooting missiles through the vacuum. There were more explosions as the prison ship we were on board shook under the force of multiple impacts. "Who the hell was that?" I shouted, looking to Gideon for answers. For once, the veteran hostage looked as surprised and baffled as we did. "I've no idea. I've never seen a ship like it before," he answered honestly. Tanya brought us both to reality, shouting, "Come on, damn it! We need to get out of here!" She pointed over the incapacitated body of the alien guard and toward the still open doorway, offering us an escape from the cell. Tanya led the way and I followed. Gideon paused only briefly, taking one last look around the hellish prison before leaving it behind. We exited and found ourselves navigating a maze of dark corridors as explosions continued to rock the alien ship. Our collars thankfully did not transmit a shock, for which we were all grateful. I can only assume the explosions had disrupted their signal. Gideon soon pushed ahead, as it seemed he knew the way. He led us to a second room, typing in a code to open the door. What we found inside was a hellish scene beyond my worst nightmares. It seemed this was the alien's torture room. I saw racks of both primitive blades and high-tech surgical devices that I assumed were designed for the sole purpose of inflicting physical pain. As we progressed through the hideous room, we saw what remained of poor Max. Jesus, I swore as I looked down upon his mutilated corpse, realizing how lucky we'd been to avoid the same fate. "Holy shit, what the hell?" Tanya suddenly exclaimed, her voice once again filled with shock and disgust. I looked up to the far wall of the room and bore witness to sheer horror. There, mounted in a macabre display, were the severed heads of aliens' many victims. Most were human, but there were other species too, exotic and unfamiliar to my eyes. One looked like some kind of aquatic creature, completed with gills and scales, while another appeared similar to a werewolf, except it had 6 eyes. In all, there were about a dozen mounted heads upon the wall. But this wasn't exactly the worst thing about the sadistic exhibit. What chilled both Tanya and I to our very core was the fact that the severed heads were still alive. I don't know how they did it, or what kind of twisted bad science they used, but each head was connected by tubes to some sort of electronical device, which seemed to be monitoring their vital signs. Ah, yes, apologies, Gideon added in a meek voice. I should have warned you about their hunting trophies. They use their technology to keep the brains alive, allowing these victims, select victims, to continue to experience pain and fear. Sadly, most of these poor souls have long since lost their minds. I shook my head, astonished at the almost flippant manner in which Gideon described these atrocities. I realized, however, that he must have lived through hell, suffering untold horrors at the hands of our sadistic alien captors. I couldn't imagine what he'd had to do just to survive this ship of nightmares. Whilst we stared at the horror of the heads, Gideon went to work, tapping into a control panel to reveal bizarre symbols that I guess recorded text in the alien's language, and images which appeared to show the ship's interior. He frowned as he tapped on the screen, obviously frustrated by what he was seeing. I know there are escape pods in the ship. I've heard them talk of emergency evacuation procedures. He pointed to the map of the ship, drawing our attention to an area at the rear of the cigar-shaped vessel. They should be located here, but I don't know how we get to them. And, even if we do, I have no idea how to operate the pods, let alone navigate one back to Earth. Tanya and I shared a look of despair, realizing that we'd got this far only to face another obstacle. But Gideon was a beaten man, resigned to failure and defeat. He'd never thought we'd get this far, and I knew we couldn't give up now. Where there's a will, there's a way. As we were considering our next move, fate once again intervened, as suddenly the room's door exploded and something entered through the smoke and fire. We prepared for the worst, but what confronted us was something new. A hovering, drone-like robot with two mechanical arms extending, both adorned with high-tech weaponry. It also had a camera-type device attached to its main body, a pitch-black circle silently observing us like it was analyzing our physical forms, or perhaps scanning our brainwaves. I looked to Gideon for an explanation, only to discover a look of bafflement on his face. Clearly, he had no idea what this entity was, or whether it meant us harm. A tension-filled moment passed as the hovering robot continued to survey us, before suddenly a green light flashed on its visible display, and to our astonishment, the robot spoke to us in almost word-perfect English. Greetings, citizen of Earth. Please do not be alarmed. I am Unit 2317, an autonomous artificial intelligence combat drone attached to the SS Righteous Fury, a Confederation warship tasked with hunting down and neutralizing pirate vessels operating in breach of galactic law. You are all victims of a criminal conspiracy undertaken by a rogue faction engaged in illegal hunting operations. Our primary mission is to eliminate the rogue hunters, but we are also tasked with rescuing any survivors and, where possible, returning them home to their home worlds. I shall now release you from your restraints. In an instant, all of our shock collars were disconnected and fell from our necks, presumably deactivated by some kind of electronic countermeasure. We all felt a great relief at being freed, although we were still a long way from home. Please, follow me, and I shall escort you to a safe zone, said the AI drone. The three of us looked to one another in confusion. I certainly didn't feel comfortable putting my trust into a killer robot from another planet, but reckoned Unit 2317 was better than our reptilian torturers. We exited through the demolished door and fled into the maze of corridors, following the hovering drone as it led the way. Meanwhile, the chaos of battle was all around us as the alien spaceship was assaulted by Confederation forces. We just turned the corner when we were confronted by a reptilian foot soldier, armed with some kind of high-tech rifle. It snarled before aiming, raising its gun and preparing to fire. But the machine reacted faster, as it rapidly fired a series of dart-like projectiles that ripped the alien's body to shreds. We walked over its body and continued our escape, observing scenes of violence as other killer drones engaged reptilian aliens in mortal combat. The fighting was fierce, but it seemed clear that the AI drones were winning, as their alien captors were being gradually wiped out and their torture ship overrun. Finally, we reached what I guessed was the rear of the spaceship, where we saw a row of circular doors with strange symbols written above them, and control panels on the metal walls beside them. "The escape pods! We've made it!" Gideon exclaimed, his eyes lighting up with hope for the first time since I'd met him. Our robotic savior extended a mechanical arm and began pushing buttons on the first control panel. "Destination Earth, location, the North American continent. Your pod shall depart in 2 of your minutes." A moment later, and the door slid open, revealing the tight but inviting pod within. "Thank God," Tanya proclaimed joyfully. "Please proceed inside," the robot instructed. Tanya jumped in without hesitation, and I went to follow, pausing only briefly to look back to the third member of our party. To my astonishment, I saw Gideon was standing back from the pod's doorway. "What are you doing?" I asked in dismay. "I'm sorry, friends. I cannot come with you. It is too late for me, do you understand? The things I've seen, what I've had to do to survive, I cannot return to Earth after all this. There must be a price." There were tears in his old eyes, and I could tell his soul was aching. I struggled to find the words to persuade him, but there was no time. Suddenly, a trio of reptilian soldiers charged down the corridor towards us, firing wildly as they came. Gideon screamed, physically shoving me into the pod and slamming his palm on the controls to close the door. I was sealed inside before I knew what was happening. I watched helplessly through the porthole window as Gideon fled and 2317 laid down covering fire, engaging the attackers in deadly combat. The battle was intense but brief, as the robotic drone eventually succumbed to the superior gunfire, exploding in a ball of flames before us. The aliens advanced upon our pod with the guns at the ready, and for a second I feared all was lost. But then the counter reached 0, and our pod launched, a huge blast of energy propelling us into space at tremendous speed. Oh shit! Tanya repeated as we were hurtled through the dark vacuum. I held on tight and continued to look through the porthole, seeing the reptilian vessel grow smaller and smaller in the distance. I observed numerous small objects ejected from the ship, which must have been more of the AI drones escaping from the doomed craft. And then, a moment later, the torturous ship exploded from the inside out, its form torn apart by white flames as the nightmare was ended. I watched the debris spreading through space and shed a tear for Gideon, believing we would never have escaped that death trap without knowing he'd imparted to us. Tanya, on the other hand, was focused on the view ahead of us as our pod rapidly approached the Earth's surface. "Look, we're going home!" she exclaimed. "We're going to make it after all." She smiled sweetly at me for a moment, and I shared her glee. But soon as we experienced the trauma of re-entry into the atmosphere, our small pod burning up as the ground rapidly approached, I felt sure we would smash into the surface in a fiery crescendo. But at the last moment, the pod engaged reverse boosters, reducing our speed and allowing us to land relatively gently on the ground, although not without a bump. A moment later, the doors of the pod automatically swung open, and we were able to breathe fresh air for the first time. And boy, it was amazing! Cautiously, Tanya and I exited the alien vessel, finding ourselves in the middle of a flat cornfield, seemingly without another soul in sight. I surveyed the scene, part of me still not believing we were truly free. "Okay, what now?" Tanya asked as she stepped to my side, her still naked skin shining under the morning sun. We soon got our answer with the heavy din of a rotor blades, as suddenly a black helicopter appeared in the horizon, rapidly approaching until it was practically hovering over our heads. We looked up in baffled confusion before seeing movement on the road at the edge of the cornfield as a fleet of dark SUVs sped into place and a small army of federal agents jumped out, all aiming guns at Tanya and I as they ordered us to get to the ground. So the feds arrested us both, bringing us into custody while they took possession of the alien escape pod, the only tangible evidence of the incident. We were held for days and questioned separately, ordered to recount the details of our abduction and captivity. I don't know why we were released. I guess we hadn't committed any crimes, but we were warned not to speak what we'd been through, or we would face severe consequences. Obviously, I have now decided to disregard that warning and tell my story publicly for the first time. Why have I made this decision? Well, I suspect my days are numbered. You see, I got word recently that Tanya is gone. But I'm not sure I believe that. I wonder whether Tanya was deliberately silenced by some shadowy government agency that wants to cover up the truth. If this is the case, they will surely come for me next. Clearly, our government knows a lot more about those abductions than they wish to share with the public. However, I doubt they can keep this secret for much longer. Not if a galactic civil war is raging in our own solar system. In any event, such is the huge gap in technology, I doubt there is much we can do to alter the outcome of this conflict. War is coming to us, and we better pray the good guys win, because I've seen the evil out in the universe. And believe me, it's terrifying. Those are amazing creepypastas readings. I hope you enjoyed them, darling, while you slept upon me. You look adorable resting on me. Now, time for me to turn off this nightlight and fall asleep with you too. Good night, cutie. Happy Halloween.
Hiya, Saki here. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope that I was able to bring you some happiness, peace, and comfort. If you want to support me on Twitch, feel free to. I stream about every day. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel. That would make me really happy. You can also find me on Patreon, Discord, or Twitter. Thank you so much for everything you guys do for me. I really appreciate it. Now, take care. Mwah.